Humanoid robots became one of the most closely watched technologies in 2025. But over the past few months, one angle of this story that has started getting a lot more attention is the safety element of these robots possibly walking around all over the place. The information is out with a new story today on how regulatory groups are thinking about setting these standards and how startups developing the robots have reacted to things. Turns out not everybody is necessarily on the same page. I want to bring on our robotics reporter, Rocket Drew, to tell us more about what he's found. Rocket, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you here.
Hi, Akash. Great to be here.
So let me understand this. Robots walking around could be dangerous. That's what I understand.
That's right. That's right. I think to understand it, it helps to have a little bit of a mindset shift. So when we think about typically buying gadgets to put in our own homes, we're used to them being very safe,
The
right?
Roomba, the
So
Roomba,
yeah.
the
I buy a
Roomba.
light bulb. Exactly, exactly. I buy a light bulb, I buy a vacuum cleaner, I buy a Roomba. I don't expect it to short circuit and catch on fire or blow up on me. We're used to these things being very safe. But imagine instead that you're a factory worker, and when you go to work every day, you're surrounded by machines like giant stamping equipment that punches out sheets of steel and big industrial arms that swing around at rapid paces and welding robots that have welding torches on the end of them. It's a very different environment, and it's an environment where a lot of people have gotten hurt over the years. And so the industrial world has built up a set of very robust safety standards to ensure that workers don't get hurt by these robots on the job. From that mindset, now you imagine introducing a new robot that walks around on two legs. It can carry all sorts of things. It can move around your facilities, and it can perform different kinds of work. And it's likely powered by AI. You can start to imagine why it would raise some alarms. People would have questions about how do we guarantee that these things are going to work safely.
So have there been issues yet with these giant honking humanoids knocking people over?
I think there haven't been any big issues yet because we're so early on. Like, not a lot of these have actually made it out into the world yet. And some of the existing safety standards do roughly apply. They apply, give a little bit of a guideline for how to handle these things in practice. But we've seen what I'd maybe call early warning shots or signs of concern. There have been instances where robots in testing have gone a little haywire and sort of gone berserk in the lab. Or there was one high profile incident a couple weeks ago where a Tesla Optimus robot kind of freaked out and threw its hand down on a table and inadvertently crushed a number of water bottles on its way down. And I think people were a little astonished to see that the robot was strong enough to crush those water bottles. Because again, these are large machines. It's just that they're usually operated with they look sort of delicate. They look like a human acting near you when you see them in these like demonstration videos.
So a big part of your story was talking about who is going to regulate these robots and who's going to set the safety guidelines. Who are the relevant players here, and how much work have they done to actually set these standards?
Yeah, that's a great question. It turns out there's a huge alphabet soup of industrial safety organizations. And so I'll spare you all of them, but a couple of the key ones to know are that at the international level, these safety standards are typically ISO standards. So that's the international governing body. And then different countries have delegates to the ISO process so that they're represented along the way. So in the US, that delegate is ANSI and ANSI. Now, ANSI also governs these sort of standards at a national level, and there are different industrial bodies, trade groups, companies that are representatives to that process and are accredited to help develop the national standards. So, ANSI doesn't have expertise in every possible industry. So they tap companies that are a little closer to the action. So in the case of robotics, they'll bring in companies that are involved in manufacturing and companies involved in making robots, and even sort of auxiliary companies involved in insurance and consulting for robotics. And these companies together will reach a consensus. They'll reach something that they all agree on, and then they will propose it, and there will be a vote, and it will be written down as a standard. Now, it's still not legally binding. Like, to be clear, this isn't a law.
These are like handshake agreements almost. Like, we will set these guidelines, and then we will hope the startups will follow them, right?
Exactly, exactly. But in practice, they work quite well because if a regulatory body, say in the federal government, does want to implement its own standard, that's the first place it's going to look for an example, is what has the industry already arrived at as a consensus.
Right.
It
Right.
also matters for companies getting insurance, right? Your insurer wants to see that you're following the best practices in the industry. And even more so than that, the OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, they say that all companies have a general duty to ensure a safe workplace. So if a company is not following the established best practices in the industry, that's kind of a red flag for OSHA as well.
So, how are the startups reacting now to the work that these regulatory bodies have done, or these hope to be regulatory bodies?
Well, over the past year or so, people have reached an understanding that the existing standards are not quite sufficient to cover humanoids. And one key reason for that is in the olden days, when your robots were mostly these industrial arms that are fixed in place or little wheeled bases that are shuttling things around a warehouse, a great safety solution was just to hit a big red button that tells the robot to stop and shut down, right? A stopped robot is a safe robot for the most part in these cases. But humanoids are a different beast entirely because if you cut all the power to them, they fall over, right? It takes constant work to make sure that the robot stays on its feet and stays balancing. So if you were to cut all power, it falls over, potentially creating a new hazard. And then you factor in what if the robot is carrying a sharp object or carrying hazardous materials? You don't want those materials to drop on the way down. So that has introduced a whole new complexity into the mix. And there's growing agreement that something has to be done about that. There should be a new standard that applies to humanoids specifically.
Well, I anticipate this is going to be one of the key issues that plays out next year, and I'm looking forward to talking with you all about it as we get more reporting on it. Rocket, I want to thank you for coming on. That is Rocket True, our robotics reporter here at The Information.